Global Times, 11th of April 2024, the Chinese embassy condemns the Canadian Prime Minister's allegation of Chinese election interference in Canada. There is widespread Chinese interference in the democratic globe. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's recent statements accusing China of interfering in Canadian elections were harshly criticized by the Chinese embassy in Canada. The Chinese embassy urged Canada to confront the facts, abandon ideological biases, and cease exaggerating the Chinese interference hoax. The embassy stated on Wednesday local time that it vehemently condemned and firmly opposed the remarks above. China has maintained its stance on non-interference in internal affairs and has never harbored any intention of meddling in Canada's internal affairs. According to the embassy, China has consistently and unequivocally communicated its stance to Canada in bilateral and multilateral discussions. Wednesday, Trudeau testified before an official inquiry that China attempted to interfere in the results of the previous two Canadian elections, but the outcome was unaffected. He further stated that it was improbable that Beijing had a preference for one political party over another, according to Reuters. The commission was established by Trudeau the previous year in response to opposition legislators' discontent with media coverage of China's potential involvement in the elections. Motivated by self-interest, certain Canadian legislators endeavor to implicate China in public inquiry to label and tarnish the country. The testimonies have been labeled suspicious, probable, and highly likely, but they do not contain substantive evidence, according to the Chinese embassy. It was noted that this further demonstrates that the public inquiry allegedly concerning foreign interference is a politically orchestrated fabrication and that some Canadians have resorted to an inexplicable degree of slander and attack against China. The Chinese government has faced allegations from Canada that its officials likely manipulated a Liberal Party nomination race in an electoral district near Toronto, as stated in a report by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Washington Post, Wednesday. In Canadian media reports, former Minister of Democratic Institutions Karina Gould was also quoted as saying that Canada's intelligence agency had detected low-level foreign interference activities by China following the 2019 federal election but that the integrity of the vote remained uncompromised. She also stated on Wednesday that almost certainly, foreign interference has been attempted in every Canadian election ever before. The Canadian radio network reported. According to Yao Beng, Deputy Secretary General of the Canadian Studies Centre of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Trudeau must use these accusations to deflect public discontent with his handling of issues, including the economy, housing, and climate change, as his approval ratings have plummeted in the last half year. Peng told the Global Times on Thursday. It is an additional attempt by him to manipulate the Canadian public, which is ignorant of the truth and the hostile nature of the deep state toward China, into participating in double standards politics. This is his political agenda, according to the Chinese expert. Yao observed that to deflect public disapproval and garner attention, the Canadian Prime Minister employed aggressive accusations to counter the Conservative Party's rise to power in Canada over the past half year, in imitation of the strategy used by the United States during the Cold War. The Chinese embassy underscored that foreign interference activities, including those conducted by Canada, are directed at China. Canada has consistently incited China's ire on significant matters about China's territorial integrity and sovereignty, including Taiwan, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and Xizang. Furthermore, Canada has provided support and condoned a multitude of anti-China separatist endeavors. The embassy noted that Canada not only displays no remorse but also retracts its previous position and falsely accuses China of interfering in Canadian internal affairs. Canadian security intelligence agencies surveilled Chinese diplomatic missions and personnel in Canada, as reported explicitly by the Canadian media. During the investigation, pertinent Canadian agencies openly acknowledged that they had disrupted the routine operations of Chinese diplomatic missions in Canada. The Canadian government continues to refer to two cases involving Canadian citizens despite having reached a substantial settlement with the parties involved. Is it not apparent who is meddling in the internal affairs of other nations? Who is conducting activities related to espionage? The facts are manifest to all, stated the embassy. In March, the federal government of Canada and one of two Michaels, who were detained by China for nearly 3 years on charges of espionage and unauthorized disclosure of China's state secrets to foreign entities, reached a $1 million compensation agreement. The Canadian government's initial allegations that it engaged in hostage diplomacy by arbitrarily detaining two Michaels from China are now hypocritical, according to some Chinese experts, because settling with Michael is equivalent to a self-inflicted wound to its credibility. Canada will confront the repercussions of its actions if it does not adhere to the facts, abandon ideological biases, cease exaggerating the falsehood of Chinese interference, and stop smearing the atmosphere of relations between the two countries. Additionally, Chinese authorities believe that Trudeau's persistent allegations as Prime Minister had undeniably impeded the progress of relations between China and Canada. Yao remarked, to begin with, that Trudeau's use of the word intentional to obfuscate the accusations of baseless and proven speculative Chinese interference in the Canadian elections is wholly irresponsible. He stated that the Trudeau administration has intentionally and persistently impeded China-Canada relations for the past 6 years, thereby harming economic and trade cooperation between the two nations. This mentality has prevented China-Canada relations from ever being viewed as an opportunity to improve the status quo. The expert further stated that the Canadian government is intentionally swaying an uninformed public to view China and Chinese companies negatively, which will only expose its negative impact on Trudeau and his party in the long run. Yao stated that an increasing number of Canadians are anticipated to recognize the veracity of the claim that China has no intention of interfering in Canadian elections.